Hello and welcome to In Depth with TommieMedia. I'm Althea Larson. St. Thomas students are lending their voices to the youth climate strike, demanding government action to decrease the drastic effects of climate change. To make this clear, students around the globe staged a walkout Friday, March 15th. St. Thomas biology professor Adam Kay is director and co-founder of Brightside Produce, an economically sustainable business that provides fresh produce for low-income neighborhoods. Today, Professor Kay will discuss how to reduce the effects of climate change and the role student activism plays. Professor Kay, thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
Yeah, so the October 2018 UN Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change report stated the world only has 11 years to make changes in order to avoid the worst effects of climate change. What changes can be made through public policy to reduce those effects of climate change?
Yeah, when that report came out, it really got people's attention. I think that 11-year time frame, I think, was I think people often thought that climate change is going to be an issue that's going to affect future generations, not this generation. And I always talk to my students, and I felt that the timeline was going to be way more condensed than that. And so this was the major effects were going to hit in sort of the prime of your working life. And so we really need to see change happening immediately. And what can we do? And so, I mean, I think there's a lot of things that could be done nationally, internationally. I think people often point to a carbon tax as being a way of moving things forward quickly if you could get public buy-in. There's also lots of other good policy ideas for being able to make change quickly. But I think that the main thing that has to happen is that we have to get strong public buy-in, and we have to get a lot of people willing to step up and support changes. And given that the effects are going to hit primarily people who are college age, the younger generation more so than my generation going forward, that they should be the leaders. And if we could get college students really motivated and activated and demanding change from leaders, we'd be then it would just give the leaders the flexibility, the freedom to start being able to think about what are the creative solutions that we can make. Because there's no easy solutions going forward. That this is going to require change. It's going to require for us to, probably make some sacrifices, but at the very least change the way we're doing things. There's no simple solution to this. So how do we get people with enough buy-in to be able to make that change?
Yeah, so the youth climate strike also focuses on the effects that climate change has on marginalized communities. How does climate change impact marginalized communities?
Well, the poor communities, poor countries have less resilience, less resources for being able to adapt to change, for instance. I was just out in San Diego a couple of weeks ago, and I was talking with a colleague who was talking about a neighborhood in South San Diego that was being threatened by rising sea levels. And the city didn't have enough tax base to be able to support an expensive levee system to be able to protect the neighborhood. And so they were actually considering drawing back city services from the land that's right on the coast, because they don't have the money to be able to help the community adapt to the changes that are coming. That's going to happen consistently in neighborhoods and in countries around the world, that the poorer countries aren't going to have the resources to be able to adapt. That's already happening. When you have food shortages occurring, they're going to hit primarily the poorer nations of the world, poorer neighborhoods of the world, and without funding available, it's going to make it harder for people to be able to adapt and be resilient.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So students also walked out of class to protest gun violence last year. How much of an impact do student demonstrations have on government officials?
Well, one event, maybe not much, but if they keep happening and keep happening, I mean, movements happened. Like, there have been big social movements happening around the world, in this country. They have happened. They need persistence. I mean, the civil rights era, like that wasn't just a one protest. That was people protesting again and again and again, and persisting and having charismatic leaders and having passionate followers, and it just took people with passion and conviction to be able to, and persistence to be able to bring that about. It's the same thing here. It's young people every single day holding people accountable and saying, we need to see change, and we're not willing to just wait for that change to come as a result of someone else's activities.
Yeah. So St. Thomas's Climate Action Plan focuses on achieving carbon neutrality by 2035. What more should administration be doing around campus?
Well, I will probably leave the specific question about what St. Thomas can do to other administrators or people who are in charge of making those sort of decisions. I'd feel a little bit irresponsible to act like I know what the right thing to do is, because the issue is that it's not done in a vacuum. A lot of the changes that could occur, maybe they're going to require more money, or at least they're going to require reallocation of funds. And when you're doing that, somebody's going to lose out in some way. So one way to do it would be to raise more revenue. Well, that revenue's got to come from someone. Who is that going to come from? But maybe it's the case that we're going to change the landscaping. Well, not everybody's going to agree with that, and that might result in certain people being turned off, and maybe there's going to be fewer students interested in coming to St. Thomas as a result. There's consequences of it. So I think people need to think about things holistically and try to come up with a solution that makes sense. But I'm really glad that you're doing this, because what we cannot do, as you started off, is be complacent and just act like someone else is going to fix this problem. I think there's probably about zero chance that we're going to be able to keep the climate to the 1.5 degrees Celsius increase, as stated in the IPCC report that you mentioned. The amount of emission reduction that would have to happen by 2030 to make that happen is basically impossible. So given that's where we are, we need radical change to happen, and universities should be the leading edge. And so I would really love to see radical change happening here, but that's not going to happen because administrators come up with a plan and say, here's what should be done. It's going to happen because students say, you know what, we really want to see this happen, and we're willing to put up and help share in the sacrifice to make this happen.
Yeah. Is there anything specific that St. Thomas students could be doing around campus or in their communities?
Expressing their opinions at every chance that they get, that this is a critical issue. I think there's a view that people don't care. So just by making it clear, we care, we really care, that would be great. And then have people be willing to make sacrifices. So there's this campaign going on now about giving up your car for Lent. Let's see students saying, not only doing it themselves, but holding everybody else accountable too. Have a goal of having fewer cars on campus, and when they propose new parking spaces, say, we don't need it. We don't need it. We're going to actually cut back how much we drive, and we're going to have more people bike and use public transportation, and we as a student community are going to make that happen. Stuff like that can go a long way when it's like students taking the lead and saying, we're going to make this happen, and we're going to express ourselves, and we're going to be really active, and have the sustainability club on campus just be overflowing with members. Stuff like that really makes a difference. People see that, and then they respond.
Well, Professor Kate, thank you so much for joining us today. If you have a suggestion for an in-depth segment, tweet us at TommieMedia. With Professor Adam Kay, I'm Althea Larson. We'll see you next time when we go in-depth on TommieMedia.